Hello and welcome to the Siwi Sofa, where we sit down with some of the most interesting participants at this year's World Water Week to learn more about the array of water-related issues being discussed this week in Stockholm. My name is Eric Paglia, host of the Siwi Sofa, which is now being streamed on the Siwi Media Hub. And the name of this session is Capacity Development in the Use of New Technologies, in which we will discuss the Cap-Tec initiative, a program designed to develop capacity in the use of new technologies for improved water management and productivity. And joining me here in the sofa for this session, we have Temba Gumbo, the Director of Cap-Net at the UNDP. We have Damien Indige, the Cap-Net UNDP Virtual Campus Coordinator and LA WetNet Manager. And Jeroen Vandensummen, the Co-Founder and Director of AVCO Foundation. Welcome you all to the Siwi Sofa.
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks for joining me here today. Perhaps you can each start by just saying a bit about your own respective organizations, and then we can get more into this Cap-Tec initiative.
Yeah, I'm the director of Cap-Net, a UNDP program. We are part of what is called the Water and Oceans Governance Program of the UNDP. What we do is we engage in capacity development for sustainable water management. So we are operational in 120 countries, and we work as a network with 23 geographic networks. And one of our key outputs is really to build and empower individuals and also enable institutions to work much more effectively. So we develop skills, also provide training, on-the-job training, and also mentoring.
Very good. You're also involved with Cap-Net.
Yeah, I've been working in water capacity development for almost 20 years now. In the region in Latin America. I'm based in Argentina, but I manage a network in Latin America, which is part of Cap-Net. And I also have a role globally in Cap-Net with innovative education and tools as online learning, which is sort of expanding our capacity to reach out different stakeholders and share the principles and tools for water management.
And Jeroen, can you tell us a bit about the AVCO Foundation?
AVCO Foundation is helping organizations, governments to become more data-driven so that they use data to come to better decisions and in turn become more transparent, effective and collaborative. And to that end, we have services and tools, open source tools, mobile phone data collection tools and cloud-based internet services to assist these services. And we do that mainly in the development sector. And actually, AVCO brings together a group of field experts in different domains that have extensive experience in the development sector and a group of high-end IT people. And we bring these two groups together in AVCO.
Very good. Temba, to what extent will technological innovations change or disrupt water resources management in the next 2 decades, in your opinion?
Yeah. It is true that we live in an era of exponentials, and this is characterized by a lot of plethora of technologies which are out there, which are being have been developed mostly in the ICT industry. We as Cap-Net, we realize that we cannot ignore these developments. So we do realize that we need to modernize our business. I guess maybe you've heard about the story of Kodak, which used to be a monopoly in terms of film and production way back in the 90s. This was a 100-year-old company. In the late 90s, it owned almost 80% of all the film production and chemical producing for photography. What is interesting though is that the digital camera in fact was first invented by Kodak. But at that time in the 70s, the executives of Kodak did not buy into it. They thought it was just a toy. It had no business case because they were focused on selling paper and chemicals. So it's not surprising that in 2012, Kodak filed for bankruptcy because they did not see the opportunities presented by the advances in ICT at that time, and they went underground. So in the water business, we see also that there are some of these technologies which are there. Some of them, they involve mobile phone technologies, they involve use of satellite imagery and remote sensing, and also they involve the use of drones. And all these combined, we see that they come to sort of enable us to manage, the big data which is demanded, for example, for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. But adding to that, we see that also in terms of our business, since we're a capacity development network, we have to explore modern ways of how we can reach out in terms of innovative learning, in terms of e-learning or blended learning. So we see our future as more riding on this wave of ICT advancement.
In which areas do you see these changes taking place?
A lot of things will take place. For example, maybe if we focus on water, one of the biggest problems which is related to water now, which maybe can be said to be will be the second phase of what looks like climate change, because climate change is air pollution in a way. What we see in terms of water is that water pollution is going to be is the next crisis that's going to hit us. We see the signs already, but managing water pollution is a little bit more complicated. And this will require a lot of monitoring in terms of water quality, and also some important decision making in order to stop or to reverse water pollution. So this is just one aspect where I see the use and advancement, use of ICT products coming to bear in terms of basically managing water pollution.
And these technologies are already available at this point.
Most of them are already available, but I think the main concern is that they are not used to the to the maximum level. Part of it is to do with the lack of knowledge and also lack of capacity to use them. But the technology and the connectivity and the related infrastructure is already in place. Even in some of the poorer countries, we see that the advent of mobile phone technology, internet, and so on is already there. So what we need to do is to capacitate individuals and also institutions to be able to use some of these tools.
Perhaps, Damon, you could say a little bit more about the adaptation of these technologies in the developing countries.
Absolutely. I think what we need to understand clearly is that knowledge is global. Once it's there, it can be applicable and used by anybody, basically, as long as we have in place a proper system to transfer and to anchor that knowledge. So it is true that some countries invest more in research and development, and that might take decades, but once those technologies are available, then the other countries, they don't need to spend the same number of decades to apply it. It's there already. It's a matter of months, even weeks. So developing countries not only have these tools available and applicable and affordable, because they are not really that expensive, but they have to do it. They cannot afford to go on managing the water resources as 20 years ago, as 50 years ago, basically because the needs are on top of them. These developing countries are facing growing populations, a huge demand in terms of food production, the need to adapt to climate change, which is global, and its impact is seen mainly on water resources. That's more floods, more droughts. They need to be ready, they need to observe and understand what's going to happen and be ready for those changes. They need to count on more energy sources for development to improve the quality of life of people, so they cannot afford the traditional way of managing water resources. They need to apply these tools. The thing is that some years ago these tools were either not available or connectivity was not in place. Now we know that both things are available. they are applicable, so things are absolutely ready. Now, for that to happen, we need to, first of all, count on a knowledge transfer system, and that's where Cap-Net plays a key role. As Temba just said, we are a global network of 23 networks and over 1,000 institutions linked with international partners as ACBO in the Netherlands and UNEP DHI in Denmark, for example, and many others who are developing these technologies. And together we can establish a system of transferring them and working with institutions in developing countries who are eager to receive this and to actually apply them and insert them. So everything is really at the upset of generating a huge change in the way water management are managed.
What else do you see needs to be done to really go all in on this leapfrogging that you're describing?
We need to be innovative in the way we do capacity development. This is not anymore about the traditional face-to-face course, 1 week, and pretend, well, here is your training manual, then you can apply it. We need to first of all, we need to work with committed institutions at the local level, institutions who have established teams, work plans, ongoing activities, and their own budget. So then we work with those, and we have to work with them for a couple of months, even up to 2 or 3 years in demonstration projects. So we need to be sure that the technology is anchored and incorporated. Otherwise, it will be just a short course. So that's one thing. To do in-house training, pilot projects, demonstration projects. Then we need to work at the university level and at the formal education level to make sure that these contents are incorporated into a curricula. So the future generation of water management and basically stakeholders in general, because water is everybody's business, they know about these things, and these things become normal in water law, in farming. There's a lot to do in farming and in the energy. So normally those would not be considered the traditional water sectors, but the link we know is very close, and we have to be there considering as I said before, the growing population and the needs for food production. So basically making sure that the curricula incorporate these technologies and working with institutions who are going to anchor these new practices. And the other thing is that we are not going to improvise and try technologies here. We're going to work with proven technologies which work, and perhaps the technologies change like we are used to change our cell phones every 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, but basically the skills, we have them already. So those are the things we need to be careful about to make sure that whatever we do is sustainable on its own and it's available and working at the local levels.
Very good. And Jeroen, the world has agreed on this series of SDGs to be realized by 2030, which will require billions in investment. Is incorporating these technologies an additional cost, or are they rather an opportunity for savings and efficiency?
I think both, but before elaborating, I want to add something to what you said, because I don't think we have enough time. You talk about innovation in a 20 years period. Innovation goes so fast if you see what happened the last 10 years. So I think it's not only the technology will come. It is about sector change. It is how we here together since 60 years work together in the development sector, especially water and sanitation. And we are not that different as, for example, the hotel sector or the taxi sector. And they were also waiting. Yeah, they did the same thing all the time. Although there were new technologies around there, they were not opening up, and that will happen with us too. Imagine if Amazon is going to sell water, or Uber is going to the villages to collect data, to use them and make money with it. Do we like that development? Probably not, because water is a public good, and data is concerned with privacy issues, etc., that we don't know whether that is guaranteed if we don't do nothing. So I see really an urgency, and I'm talking in 5 years' time, this is going to happen. And yes, there will be nice tools, and yes, we are already starting open source mobile phone data collection tools, and yes, there is water quality tools available on your phone to make things easier, but that will not bring the big change. The big change will be if we are ready to confront what we are doing, what the impact is, what we're doing, through data-driven decisions, through transparency. And although I'm part of this ecosystem of governance and donors and NGOs and some private companies, but it goes too slow. We were funded here in Stockholm Water Week, where I met Thomas Belkeman, another co-founder of ACFO, who was the IT specialist coming out of Silicon Valley, and he was really surprised what he saw here. He said, why you don't use those new tech? Why you are not going into cloud services and these kind of things? Why you make not use of your mobile phone? And we did. But the uptake is too slow, because we think in programs of limited durations. We think into for our own funding for the next 3-4 years. When we said, as ACFO 4 years ago, we are gonna map all water points in Africa, people thought that we were crazy. But it's happening, and it's not only us, and it could have gone much, much more faster if we team up. Especially IT is not something you develop in a project. If you try to do it, it will be a nice pilot. We have plenty of nice pilots. But we need to scale. We need to get really decisions that are being based on real evidence.
We don't want to be Kodak executives from the 1970s.
That could happen, and we are near to that point. And then we are sitting, and maybe we are not there anymore in 20 years in the way we function now. That happens to other examples. And if we want to change this, then we need to look not only at new models of financing water kiosks, but also how to finance ourselves. Because if you really want to take advantage of new technology development, then you need massive investments, not that big compared to the whole budget, but you need to invest in IT infrastructure. You should not try to do it alone, but you should team it up and do it together. Then change can happen faster.
I mean, investment from where and to where? Where should the money come from, and where should it go to actually push these things forward?
I mean, I think there is enough, no, I can't say that, but there is quite a lot of money in the sector that can be used much more efficient. So in the beginning, you have to reorient your investment to hook up onto these technology development. In the longer run, like the Ubers and the others prove, it will be much more efficient because you do it at scale and you have that enormous advantage of the scale. And we hardly have scale in the development sector. Many different players, many different single investments. So I'm really, in that way, I'm optimistic and concerned. That's too little too late, but sorry.
On the other hand, well, we all know that the world needs tons of money for development, and there is a scarcity in that sense. On the other hand, there is money in the world, and it's a matter of taking rational decisions on where it's going to be allocated. For example, if we don't do anything about climate change, and then we have a city totally flooded, then there's going to be billions of dollars spent in the next year to put that city back again on track. So eventually, money is being placed by the governments, by the companies, by the people. People are paying money for having safe water, and if not, they pay it with their own health by not having it. So in the end, what we need to do is we need to understand the needs, and we need to take leadership in bringing solutions. When we started with Cap-Net 15 years ago, it was all about recognizing that the water sector has interrelations with all stakeholders, and it was about what's called the principles of integrated water governance management. And we had a huge role in making sure that nowadays most countries are managing their resources in line with those principles. Now we need to understand that the needs are calling for the incorporation of these technologies, because we can, as Jerome just said, we can make sure that we drive changes in a faster and more efficient way. And that's what these partnerships are about, bringing the solution at the right time and making sure that change happens in agreement with the benefits, which in the case of water and development is basically everybody, including the environment.
And just one of the things also, just to emphasize, since I'm African and I relate to the continent, some of these technologies also are not just for the developed world. They have got a lot of relevance in developing countries in order to leapfrog development. take a case of maybe precision farming, where you can combine with the use of drones and can also combine with the automated tractors and bring efficiency into farming. This is something which Africa, for example, should not just follow the traditional pattern in terms of development, but can make some of these big strides which are available. And we see some of these technologies already being adopted in certain countries. And one of the most important thing is to maybe nurture them, learn about them, and be able to upscale. It is important also to emphasize the question of bridging the digital divide, which is also pretty important in looking at North and South, and maybe again South-South, and how we can learn from the use of some of these technologies. So I just wanted to emphasize that point, that it's not only tools which only appeal to the North, but it's actually tools which will make a difference in the developing world.
And Jerome, you wanted to add something to that as well.
Now, before this, we was jokingly, maybe you should base Cap-Net in Silicon Valley, yeah, or another Silicon Valley around where technology thinking is prevailing, to really know what's going on there and see how you can attract people for your own cause.
Yeah, we can get back to the Cap-Tec initiative, which we started by discussing. Cap-Net UNDP is well known for being an open and inclusive network. And so who do you consider the ideal partners for Cap-Tec?
Yeah. So about 2.5 years ago, we mooted this idea of Cap-Tec. And there were a number of partners, including ACFO, which signed up. And Damian has mentioned also, UNEP DHI, Water Research Commission, European Space Agency, just to name a few, which came onto the table and said, look, we have something to contribute towards this whole capacity development in the use of new technologies. So an ideal partner, what we're looking at is partners who are coming with some knowledge and also some products which are there to be offered and which can be used in the whole capacity development sphere. Of course, we are also, as Jerome is indicating, we're looking also at working closely with some of the IT companies, including Google, for example. There's no need why we shouldn't engage Google in trying to work with them, or even companies which manufacture drones, such that we can be able to make products which actually speak to the challenge on the ground in terms of effective water management and also improved water productivity. So there is a number of partners whom we are seeking to join up, and of course at the same time also we are looking at partners who can help us in terms of resource mobilization. Resource mobilization mostly to support countries in the south in terms of engaging with them. So as you have said, Cap-Net is an inclusive network, and it welcomes quite a number of partners on board. So in those short words, we're still seeking some of the partners out there to come and join. So it's an open call we are inviting them to come in and join.
And to close the cycle, of course, we have the institutions who are going to apply on the ground these tools. For example, river basin organization, water utilities, ministries, water management agencies, NGOs, transparency NGOs, environmental groups, all of those entities who are actually the users and the people and institutions actually managing and overall elaborating a vision on how they would like to see their environment and the water resources sector in the country in the next years.
Perhaps we conclude by talking a little about the financing. With limited financial resources to support development project, is Cap-Tec considering co-funding and other forms of leverage funding?
Yes, of course, Cap-Net traditionally has been supported through bilateral support, mostly from the Dutch and the Swedish government, and also some funds from the European Union. But what we're looking at here is also trying to invite the private sector The private sector, we're also not looking at it from a point of view of part of their corporate social responsibility, but maybe looking at engaging at a much higher level, where also they can see that they can provide some of the kind of grant funding, but also at the same time looking at possible investment in the future. So the key partner also which we want to draw here is basically the private sector, because the private sector will, to a large extent, determine a lot of the future in terms of water management.
Also, in these last 15 years of work, we have done certain studies about our impact and our leverage capacity, and working with these institutions and local stakeholders, we know that for every $1 invested from Cap-Net, we can leverage more than 3. So that's also a main asset of the program. So we're not going to just go with the technology out of nowhere and trying to apply it, but as I said, we will go into a water ministry, for example, or a river basin organization who has its own team, its own place of work, and its own program, and say, okay, let's build into this, and then how we can complement. So the investment is not only secured, but it's leveraged up to 3 or 4 times.
Do you have something you want to add there, John?
If you talk about investments, and also in your previous name, I think there is a big change will come also that new technology can reduce risks. And if we can make risks transparent and better accessible, then investment is more likely to come. And for that also, data and a good data infrastructure is needed, just so that people can take really well-balanced business opportunities and investment opportunities.
Temba, do you have any closing comments about Cap-Tec, and where do we go from here with it?
Yeah, I think the closing comment here is we're ready, and we're to shoot to space. And if there are any partners who are willing to join, if they could contact us at Cap-Net, and also they can contact some of our partners who have signed up to implement this Cap-Tec proposal. So we're looking forward to hearing from those who are interested, and taking the program to its full implementation in the few coming years.
Very good. Well, thank you all for joining me here on the Siwi Sofa, and best of luck with future work with Cap-Net and Cap-Tec.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in to the Siwi Sofa. Stay tuned for more episodes throughout the World Water Week.